Chapter 11. MacLeod left the restaurant a few minutes after his inquiries about Brenda. There did not seem to be too much to worry about. So she was in forensics, and she had a few fragments of his samurai blade. They would surely mean nothing to her. And what if they did? He stood outside the door of PJ's for a moment, breathing in the soft night air. The city was humming with life. He could feel it pulsing through the sidewalk under his feet. New York, like most capital cities, never fully laid down its head and got a night's sleep. MacLeod had seen them all. Rome, London, Paris, Moscow. Maybe Moscow slept. No, there were those who ruled the night, even there. The mighty hearts of the cities were never still, not these days, these nights. He strode off down the street, intending to take a shortcut back to his apartment. There was a construction site across which he had to walk, and as he stepped into the shadows from the scaffolding, he regretted not bringing his sword. It was a foolish omission. In the middle of the site, he stopped. He had heard something, a small sound behind him. Someone was following. It might be a mugger. He was lucky if it was a mugger. A second later, he saw a shape and ducked into the shadows. The figure came on, paused, and looked about uncertainly. MacLeod waited. As she came up alongside him, he reached out and grabbed her, pulling her out of the moonlight. "Hey!" she began, but he put his finger to his lips. "There's someone else," he whispered. "Quiet." She did as she was told for a moment, then wrenched herself away from him. It was Brenda. "There's no one else. What are you trying to do?" she said in a normal voice. She backed away from him. The next moment there was a thump as someone jumped between them from above. MacLeod anticipated the stroke from the sword and ducked out of the way. The blade struck the scaffolding just above his head, and sparks showered his hair. The Kurgan cursed. "Damn you!" MacLeod kept moving, and the sword slammed into the wall where he had been standing. He could hear Brenda making a peculiar noise. "Run!" he shouted. There was a heavy cable at his feet, about a yard in length. He snatched it up and backed away from the Kurgan, swinging the cable in an attempt to ward off the blows. The Kurgan grunted and swung again, catching the cable and almost ripping it from MacLeod's hands. Brenda was still there. He saw her stoop, then she called, "Catch! Here!" A metal pipe came through the air, and he dropped the cable and caught it, holding it like a sword. The next blow rang against the metal pipe, and MacLeod sidestepped. He slammed the pipe into the Kurgan's chest, and the big man stopped in his tracks, letting out another grunt. "Come," said the Kurgan, making a beckoning gesture. MacLeod turned and ran, hoping to draw the Kurgan away from Brenda. Once she was out of danger, he could look for an escape himself. What a stupid thing. To come out without his sword. They could have settled it now, which was what the Kurgan was hoping to do, of course. MacLeod put a truck between them, and the Kurgan rained blows on the metal bodywork in an attempt to hit his adversary. MacLeod rolled under the truck and out the other side, coming up behind the Kurgan. He swung the pipe at the skull, and the Kurgan staggered sideways, dropping his sword and turning to face MacLeod. The Scot struck again, burying the pipe in the Kurgan's gut. He brought it back for a third blow. The Kurgan parried this with his arm and then gripped the pipe, wrenching it from MacLeod's grasp. The big man grinned, twirling the pipe like a drum major's baton. "Now," he said. MacLeod's legs went from under him as the pipe smashed into his knees. He fell on his back and the Kurgan stood over him, still smiling. "Nice to see you again, MacLeod." He reached down, picked up the Scot, and slammed him bodily against the scaffolding. All the wind went out of MacLeod's lungs, and pain shot through his chest. He heard someone shrieking. It was Brenda. "Stop it! Stop!" Why didn't she run? What was she waiting for? MacLeod slumped forward as the Kurgan hit him again. "There can be only one." He kicked MacLeod in the groin, then stepped away to retrieve his sword. MacLeod snatched up the pipe again, holding it like a bar in front of his face. The sword sent up another shower of sparks, and the frustration in the Kurgan was evident in the stream of curses that followed. Suddenly there was a wind, and the air was full of sound. A light came on, blinding the pair of them for a moment. Over the sound of the rotors above came a voice from a megaphone. "You! On the ground!" Where the hell else would he be? Thought MacLeod. The helicopter came lower. "Separate now!" The Kurgan looked at MacLeod and he braced himself, ready for another blow. "Put your weapons down!" said the policeman. Brenda then stepped forward into the light. "Put your hands on your head!" The Kurgan lowered his sword. "Another time, Highlander." He nodded. "It's not hard to find you." "Hey!" cried the voice from above. "I'm not going anywhere," said MacLeod as the Kurgan disappeared into the shadows. "Hold it right there! Come back here!" cried the cop. MacLeod began running in the opposite direction to the Kurgan, leaping over stacks of pipes. He could hear the chopper lifting again, its searchlight trying to pick him out of the night. He kept on running for a while, then realized that Brenda was following him. He could hear her gasping and stumbling some way behind. He stopped and waited. As she reached him, he grabbed her. She gasped, "Wait a minute! Who in the name of God was that?" She paused to catch her breath. "He called you Highlander. And what did he mean? There can be only one. Only one what?" "Listen, lady, you almost... I want to know." "Shut up." He was angry with her. "Don't you ever follow me again." She stuck out her jaw. "You followed me first. What is this, macho time? You quit following me and I'll think about it." She was right, but he wasn't going to say so. "You only have one life," he said in a quieter tone. "If you value it, go home and don't try to see me again." She looked at him with mock innocent eyes and said in a coquettish voice, "Yes, you can." He was taken aback for a moment by this sudden change in attitude. "Can what?" "You can take me home. You asked me in the bar, and I'm accepting." He smiled and shook his head. He knew what her game was, and he wasn't going to fall for it. "So you can pump me?" I think you know too much already. It's enough. You interest me. Look, I'll tell you again. While you stick around me, you're in great danger. I can take care of myself. I can't take care of you too. It's nothing to do with being macho. It's to do with being sensible. If you were a 6-foot male boxer with a gun in your hand, I'd tell you the same thing. Go home. Leave me alone. Well, walk me to the subway. That I don't mind doing. He took her arm. Wouldn't you prefer a cab? Either. They found their way out of the construction site on the far side, and MacLeod hailed a cab. She said nothing more, and he watched the driver pull away, taking her into the heart of the city. Then MacLeod began to walk back to his own apartment, keeping a wary eye on the alleys and dimly lit arcades which might harbour his old enemy. Back in his apartment, he made himself a cup of coffee and took the samurai sword from its hiding place. He took an oily rag and began to wipe the blade, noting the edge and where it had been chipped by the concrete pillar. Then he took out a whetstone and began to hone the edge, back to its original sharpness. It was a magnificent weapon, 2,500 years old and still unmatched by any modern equivalent. He had inherited it from his friend and mentor a long time ago. The telephone rang, interrupting his thoughts. He let it ring. It would not be Rachel, and she was the only one he wanted to hear from, if anyone. After a while, the ringing ceased. He moved around the apartment, collecting his thoughts, pausing to lift an African antique statuette, weighing it in his hand. It was of a bad god, a squat little demon with bulbous lips and a leer that told of secret deaths in the night. There were spirits of healing and devils for killing. Devils. He had been accused once of witchcraft, of having the devil in him.